Hey everyone, it's Michael GoosebumpsFan. I'm back today with a new review and a new hat. Don't tread on me hat, because that's the American way. Anyway, today I have a book review on Goosebumps. It's a classic book, number 54, Don't Go to Sleep. I have never read this before, never owned this book before. It's one of those books I never really had any kind of interest in picking up when I was a kid in the 90s and the early 2000s when I really got into Goosebumps. And I have to tell you, I'm not that excited for the TV episode. I wasn't excited to read this book either. And the book sort of surprised me in a lot of ways. I was actually very surprised by how much I liked it. It was a very unique Goosebumps book, but not in like the best possible ways. It's definitely not a scary Goosebumps book. It has a little bit of tension there, but not really too much. It is the most plotless, boring, at times, meandering book I've ever read from Goosebumps. And it wasn't bad either. It was just good. It was decent. It was solid, fun, fine, whatever. It wasn't the most amazing thing I've ever read, but it wasn't horrible. It wasn't a complete loss. I've heard a lot of people in my comment sections tell me that Don't Go to Sleep is not that great of a book. I actually kind of disagree for the most part. I think it's relatively enjoyable for what it is, for the kind of content that's here. Now, of course, with Goosebumps, these are very short books. If you're newer to my channel, if you're this, for whatever reason, happens to be your first review from me, these books are about 120 pages, typically. This one's about 118. The books fly by. Bigger font for the type, and it's not really the most character-dense book to ever exist as a series. All the characters from the books kind of feel the same thing over and over again. Each story might have its own little scenario it kind of promotes with the title or with the general story that's told, and usually they're really solid. Even if they're a relatively what would be considered a bad book, these are not so much. They're relatively enjoyable almost always. Even Monster Blood, which I would consider one of the worst out of the Monster Blood, or, well, not just the Monster Blood series, but the original classic series, I think it's one of the weakest books Goosebumps has ever put out. Just the first book, mind you. But it's not a complete loss. You know what I mean? It's just kind of not that great at the same time. Don't Go to Sleep basically has the worst main character I have ever read in Goosebumps. I've read a lot of these books, not all of them, but a lot of them, to the point where I have enough experience that I can be completely aggravated and annoyed with certain Goosebumps characters. And a lot of the time, if they're a bad character or an annoying character, they'll be a side character and not the main protagonist. This book is not the case. The main character, Matt, is the most whiny, crybaby kid I have ever seen in my life. And if you act the way Matt acts, any viewer of this video, you should be ashamed of yourself and you should apologize to your parents. That's how I feel. It's not a good character. The book itself I enjoyed story-wise, whatever little type of story there is there. Matt comes from a household where there's his mom. I believe it said his dad had passed away. I believe it said that. I could be wrong, but I believe that's what happened. And also he has a brother and sister who are older than him who are always mean to him. They prank him, they beat him up, they tattle on him all the time. Just really mean kids in general. And all that I could get away from. It's the reactions by Matt. Matt is the most slobby, mean kid ever. Now mind you, I can relate at the beginning of the book when it's talking about Matt having a room and having a house in general where he really can't keep everything organized. He has so much crap. And anybody who's watched my channel, you know I can relate to that. I'm not a hoarder per se, but everything I own, I pretty much have read, watched, whatever. I don't really just kind of buy things and stack it up. There are plenty of things I haven't read and watched yet, especially on my Kindle where I have a lot of comics and whatnot. But generally in my life, like things you see behind me, I've probably watched every single one of these movies over here for the most part, read pretty much every book on these shelves, all these comics and whatnot. But the problem is still there. It still stacks up upon itself. It's still really a big mess a lot of the time. Matt struggles with this tremendously, and I love that about that character. That could have been something cool as a little character trait that most Goosebumps characters don't have that. You know, typically they might have a brother or a sister, and that's all the character depth kind of goes into, which is fine, because it's a kid's book series. I'm cool with that. But this was interesting as a new way to take this, and Matt has a guest room in his house that his mom, you know, takes care of, he and his family. And this guest bedroom is only used once a year by his grandparents when they come over to stay for Christmas. That, like, one night. That's it. One night a year. And he kind of makes the argument that, hey, Mom, you know, I want to stay in this room. I want to move my stuff into that room. It's bigger than my room. Which didn't make any sense to me to begin with. Why they didn't just have him move into that bedroom if he already had a bunch of crap. Maybe he just kind of accumulated it over time. I don't really know. But he could have just moved into that room to begin with. For some reason, the mom has an issue with that. Instead of just trading the stuff out, apparently his room is too small to put, you know, a double bed or whatever, or one big, like, queen-size mattress or anything. for the grandparents. I think that was the whole logic behind this, but, you know, anyway, I won't get into that too much. It's kind of stupid, but that was kind of the big draw here. And in the middle of the night one night, Matt sneaks into that guest bedroom and sleeps in that bed. And when he wakes up, he's somebody different. He's either younger or older. He might not even be human at times. There's all kinds of wild scenarios that happen in this book. And literally the entire book is him trying to make his way back to the real current reality, trying to figure out if he's just stuck in a dream or if he's actually waking up, what's going on here. And then there's also two guys in suits that are chasing him, and there's also a girl he meets that he becomes friends with throughout these adventures, kind of like in a Groundhog Day type of way. And he just tries to find a way out of this whole scenario, and it's 120 pages of this kid going through this, and it goes over and over and over itself constantly. It just keeps repeating the same thing. And it really doesn't go anywhere. That's why I said it's flat out just pretty much the most meandering Goosebumps book I've ever read in my life. There's not a whole lot happening here. Even some of the worst Goosebumps books I've reviewed, like the one special edition from Give Yourself Goosebumps, the first special edition, something about something Escape Doom, I don't know, the Museum of Doom, something like that. The one with a skeleton dinosaur on the cover that I've done a review for here on the channel. Some of the worst books I've read in Goosebumps are things like that. And at least they had a lot of events happening. Even if they weren't always satisfying, they had a lot happening there. And this book doesn't even really have that. There's like one interesting scenario that he wakes up as a particular thing or person, whatever, that I thought was very interesting, that they handled that pretty well. Other than that, not really. I mean, it's mostly just him going to sleep, waking up, going to sleep, waking up. And the whole deal for this, and the reason why they keep having the whole sleep reference, is because this kid likes to sleep a lot. Matt does, even before this whole situation took place. That's really all this book has going for it. But in the meantime, amongst him going through this very meandering, bland story, it's very much what I would call a filler book in Goosebumps, kind of filling between a really great book and another really great book in the series. I don't have the list open right now, so I can't really tell you what those books are, but still. The thing that gets me, there's just not a whole lot happening here, but I did kind of enjoy the humor here. As annoying as Matt is as a character, some of the things that happen to him are kind of cute and funny, I think. Enough of a silly nature to it to make it work. And that's where R.L. Stine always shines in relatively bad Goosebumps books. He can take a story that really has no steam or even coals to put in the oven for it, and he can do something with it. He can always make it a little bit special in some way, shape, or form, and I think he kind of pulls that off here. It's not a bad Goosebumps book. It's not really even a good Goosebumps book. It is as bland as you could possibly get with a Goosebumps book. And I don't find that completely insulting. I think it's just kind of, if you're a collector, you should pick this up. If you're not a collector, I wouldn't recommend it to you. It's probably not going to be that great for you. But I could see people liking this a lot more than I could, and I could see people hating this a lot more than I do. But for me, it's just as middle of the road as it could possibly be. And I can take it for what it is. I enjoyed it for what it was. It's just a fun little silly small-scale adventure type story about a kid waking up with something different every single day. He may or may not have brothers and sisters. It may or may not be the same brothers and sisters or parent or anything like that. It's really wild, honestly. It's just constantly changing things up every time he has to force himself to go to sleep and whatnot in certain horrible situations. But it can be okay at times. I liked it. I didn't hate it. That's all I really cared about. I enjoyed a lot of it. It just wasn't extremely recommendable. You know, it wasn't something I'm going to memorize the rest of my life. It might even be towards the bottom of all of the classic Goosebumps books I've read so far. I mean, I haven't read some of the big hitters that people tell me are terrible, like Chicken Chicken, and I don't know, some of the other things. I've heard Barking Ghost after I mentioned it in my previous video. I heard a lot of people say Barking Ghost is terrible, and I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe I'll end up loving it. I love You Can't Scare Me, and everybody else hates that. But I don't know. Barking Ghost could be another one that might be very low tier in the typical ratings of Goosebumps books from the old classic series from the 90s. This one is probably pretty low for the bar for me. Again, it's not horrible. It's not something like Monster Blood that I completely don't recommend at all. I think it's a mess in that regard, but this book has not a whole lot going for it, as I've said over and over again, just like with Matt. You know, I'm doing the same thing he was doing. Anyway, when it comes to, if I can pick it up, don't go to sleep. If I could rate this on a 5-star basis, I would probably give it like maybe a very low 3 out of 5 stars. It's not really the most engaging read either. It took me about a week to read this book because I wasn't super sucked into the story. I read about half the book, and then I just wanted to watch movies all week, and I watched movies all week instead of reading the book and trying to get a review out to you guys, so I apologize for that as well. But if you rate it, you'll probably know what I mean. You'll probably understand exactly where I'm coming from, because it's not that great. I've heard the TV episode is horrible. I think JonTron covered this in his TV episode reviews, and that TV episode, if it's anything of what I'm remembering, it was bad. It was real bad. I have a DVD copy of it, so I'm going to possibly either tonight or tomorrow try to get around to this, God willing, and do a video about it. But, oh, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad right now. Don't Go to Sleep is not a terrible, terrible thing, but it certainly ain't great by any means. But again, if you want a small-scale, not scary Goosebumps book, this is the one to go to. If you want something kind of not so intimidating to show to a younger brother or sister that might be like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever, to show them what an introduction to Goosebumps could be, this may not be the best, most recommendable book from the series, but it might be a good starting point for somebody to get into Goosebumps, if that makes sense. This could be a book totally aimed for younger readers, even though the cover's not that scary, the story is not that scary. Really doesn't have anything to do with a monster under the bed like this cover seems to indicate, which is stupid and false advertising, but it's Tim Jacobus, so I don't care. It looks nice. Anyway, what are your thoughts on Don't Go to Sleep? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you love or hate the TV episode? Again, I'll try to get around to do a review for that as well as the My Hairiest Adventure episode, because I still haven't covered that here on the channel. It's been like 3 weeks since I read that book and reviewed it, and still have not touched that episode, even though I own it. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I think you guys will be a little bit more excited about the next book I'm going to review on the channel. I'm hoping to get that around sometime this week at some point. I don't know how soon it could be, but I'm really digging the book so far that I'm reading. And I don't know, maybe you'll like it, maybe you'll hate it, I don't know. But anyway, for now, 3 out of 5 stars for Don't Go to Sleep. It ain't great. It's not horrible, though. It's not completely a giant loss. It could have been, but it's not, in my opinion, at least. I could see people hating this a lot more, like I said. But anyway, what are your thoughts on this? Put your thoughts in comments down below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Put your thoughts in comments down below about that as well. I'd love to hear what all you guys have to say about this stuff. I'm loving how we have so many people coming to the channel right now, so we can talk about things like this a little bit more in depth. There's a lot of different types of people watching this too, so we can talk about a lot of different angles to these stories and what really works and what really doesn't in the comments. They probably have some spoilers down there, so be a little careful in the comments section. I'm just warning you ahead of time. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys. May the Lord Jesus Christ bless you guys today, and goodbye.